Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to today's webinar. We're going to talk all about resumes and interviewing in a digital space today. My name is Mary Duffley, and I'm the Assistant Director of the Associated Alumni on the St. John campus, and it's a pleasure to have you today. This is a two-part series. This is the first of a two-part series that we are connecting you with alumni, sharing their expertise and advice on a variety of different topics. And the next topic is on March 22nd, and we're going to be talking about managing your online presence. So I'm very grateful to have the alumni with us today who are able to join us to share their advice. They're all wonderfully very experienced and have a wealth of knowledge to be able to share with you. We're really grateful that we can provide these professional development opportunities to current students. We're always very conscious of trying to prepare you for the workforce or prepare you for beyond UNB and beyond university. So this is an opportunity to learn some things. Today, if you're thinking about part-time employment this summer, or you're graduating in 2022 and you're looking for full-time employment, hopefully today's session will be able to help you. So the format for today is Q&A. So you've submitted some questions. We also have some other questions that we were going to ask our panelists. And if you have questions that you want to ask that have not been asked, please feel free to, on the link below in the Q&A function, put your questions in, and we'll get to as many questions as we possibly can within our 45 minutes to an hour together. This webinar will be recorded, so if you've missed something, you've come in late, we will be posting this webinar on our website in the coming days. It's always the thing that sometimes you miss something, you have an interview, and then you want to go back and listen to what the experts have told you in preparation for the interview. So it will be there. It'll be on our website for perpetuity. So you can go back to take a look. So I'm going to ask our panelists to introduce themselves first, and then we'll begin quickly with our Q&A, and we'll go from there. So I'll ask Zoe Britt to introduce herself first, and then we'll go on to Michelle and then to Andrea.
Hi, my name is Zoe Britt. I've been in about HR for the past 5 years. 2.5 of those have been in recruitment, and I'm currently in an HR business partner role.
Thanks, Zoe. How about you, Michelle?
Hi, my name is Michelle Francis Doyle, and for the past 12 years, I've been in an employment counseling role at Working New Brunswick, and that's part of Government New Brunswick. And as of the new year, January the 4th, I started a new role called Workforce Consultant. So Workforce Consultant's job is to help New Brunswick employers with recruitment and training needs for employees and any HR challenges they might be facing.
Excellent. Thanks, Michelle. And Andrea.
Thanks, Mary. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Andrea Johnson, and I'm the Director of Talent and Organizational Development. I also have responsibility for the Provincial Volunteer Service, and I co-lead diversity and inclusion for the Nova Scotia Health Authority. I'm not even going to say how long I've been in HR. I'm just going to say I've got the scars, the medals, all of that. So hopefully I can pass on some nuggets this afternoon. So thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thank you all. It's again, you can tell they were an incredible group of individuals. So we're very pleased that they were able to take some time out of their day to provide some advice to you folks. So we're going to kick off the Q&A. We're going to start with resumes. So let's talk about resumes first, and then we'll move into to interviews after we sort of cut through the resume. So I'm going to kick off with Zoe first, and I'm going to ask, so a lot of questions have actually been submitted about this. Obviously, we're looking at students who have maybe little to no work experience. How do you create a resume when you don't have a lot of job experience?
I would start off by kind of getting a different template. So don't use the same one. If you go on, there's a few generic ones on Microsoft, but kind of try to make yours stand out a bit. Have a nice clear format, have your name at the top, your education, and then below list your experience and all your volunteer. If you don't have a lot of experience, the big things I look for in resumes is your volunteer experience, your leadership, anything that you've done extracurricular. All those things are kind of applicable to the workforce. So if you're taking time out of your day on top of school to volunteer, that's huge. Those skills are transferable to the work environment. So definitely, if you can't get any work experience right now, try to get involved in the school and your community. And the best part, UMB has some amazing volunteer opportunities, and there's some great references when you go to apply to jobs.
Excellent, good advice. Michelle, when we think about a resume and what to include, and I think to Zoe's point, the volunteer experience is so crucial. And I think sometimes students don't give that as much credit, but what else could they be including on there in terms of, if you're a second or third year student, do you include things from high school? So where do you sort of draw the line in terms of what should be included on the resume? Sorry, you're muted, Michelle. How many times have we said that in the last 2 years?
That's okay, thanks, thank you. I would say that I think really depending on the person, whether or not you would include some things from high school. There might be some French language certification that you got from high school that would be important for the company to know. Potentially, as Zoe said, some leadership that you perhaps took on in high school and maybe haven't made or had as much time to do in university, but you'd like to highlight, or you're working on getting back into a leadership role. I think for sure, there isn't any hard and fast line, I don't think, but depending on the person and your experience, you can have that on there for sure.
What about like soft versus hard skills? Do you need to be including both, one or the other? Is one's more important than the other?
Well, I'll leave Andrea and Zoe for some comments too, but I guess for both hard and soft, I said both. So the hard often shows what you can do, and the soft skills often tell the employer who you are. So what are those, what can you do for them is very important to get that on there, but also a little bit about who you are. Are you a good listener? Are you a good teammate? Can you do things that other people can't do? So right. I think you need both.
Andrea, what about common trends, resume trends? Is there any, trends that are out there that students should be following, or is it, depending on their own situation?
Yeah, thanks, Mary. I think it really is dependent upon your own situation. As we all might have guessed, a resume should be personalized to where we are in our career, understanding, are we just starting out in our career? Do we have little to no experience? Or are we at a place in our career where we've got a bit of experience, but perhaps we're experiencing a career transition that's either maybe imposed upon you by your employer, or perhaps you're simply looking for a new opportunity to build skills and advance your career. So some common formats that I see would be the chronological format. So, the resume that just lists your work experiences in chronological order. And when I think about that type of format, I think that's a format that's typically helpful for job seekers who perhaps maybe they've worked in the same industry, they've had the same employer for some time, and perhaps they want to show career progression. That type of format is often chosen by people who are applying to maybe more leadership positions, senior leadership positions.
Right.
There's also a combination resume format. So that's used by job seekers who have had a mix of experience and skill development, and or those who have had maybe a break in their employment for any reason. So it could be maternity leave or healthcare leave, as an example. This type of format emphasizes not only your experience, but also skill development. Those are important features on your resume. And the last format that I see is one called a functional format. And I tend to offer this advice, and I've certainly offered this advice to my two sons who have been seeking careers and job opportunities over the last number of years. So this is typically something used by entry-level applicants that really don't have experience to bring to bear, work experience to bring to bear. And it's maybe designed more for applicants who want to highlight their education and skills that they've built, either extracurricularly or through volunteerism. And maybe it's also good for someone who may have had multiple gaps in their work history. Mary, I'll also offer that I think we can have more than one resume format. So I'll take my personal experience. I have had a few career transitions. I primarily had HR experience, but there was something in me that knew I enjoyed business development or, something more a bit creative. So I created a couple of different formats to serve where I was applying to and the
Yeah.
type of role. The last point that I wanted to offer is that job seekers need to think about employers' use of an applicant tracking system. So what we may feel is, a really lovely looking resume and it's a bit fancy and it helps us stand out. Often when employers use an applicant tracking system, that design that perhaps they've chosen or that layout may not interact well with that ATS system being used. So while I like creativity, reserve that for the type of role that you're applying to. And also when you know that there isn't an applicant tracking system in place, that there might be compatibility issues.
That tracking system, and maybe Zoe, you can speak to this too, because it probably is something that JDI uses. Is it really about words that you use? So they almost pick up versus picking up words or adjectives that you are using to describe yourself. So it's really important that you have to have the content has to be correct. Is that, how do they use that system?
I always tell people, excuse me, when you upload your resume, make sure it's uploaded in a PDF, because what on my computer, I might be using an older or newer computer versus yours.
Good point. Yeah.
So my format might look great on mine, but when you upload it on yours, you might open things are array and you'd be thinking, this person told me they have great attention to detail, but it doesn't look like their attention to detail is great. And what Andrea said too is, if I'm applying for an accounting position, I don't need a fancy resume. I don't need to have all the bells and whistles aesthetically. I want to make sure the content's correct. But if you are applying for a marketing position or a sales or something a little more flashy, you want to get a little creative and put a little more time into the resume on how it looks visually. But when you upload it to the system, it could be a bit different. For our system, you upload your resume. What you upload is what I see. So whatever you save it as, I see that. So usually I tell people upload it Zoe Britt in the year, so we know it's kind of professional. But some of them, when you go to upload your resume, it just wants you the content. So it doesn't care anything about how it looks aesthetically.
Okay. Interesting. So another question, Zoe, is about cover letters. It's always an interesting thing because there's some people who really like cover letters and want cover letters and some who don't. And I think students are scared, obviously, about cover letters because how much information do you put on there? What do you include? Do you tell the whole story about your life? Probably not. So are cover letters important? How important are they? Or does it depend on the job that you're going for?
I say it would depend on the job. If you read an application and it asks for a cover letter, make sure you fill it out, because that's like the first step to show that you are reading instructions and you can kind of execute that.
Right.
It's also good to, your resume should be about 2 pages, so you can't always fit everything in a resume. So it's great to highlight some of the key features in your cover letter. I usually say it should be 3 to 4 paragraphs max, no more than a page. The first paragraph is just introduce yourself, your education. The next 1 or 2 paragraphs, just a little bit about your experience and what you bring to the table. And then a fourth one, just to sum it up, about why you'd be a great fit for the job. And hopefully you'll hear back from them. I used to hate cover letters. I thought no one's going to read this, but if you're between candidates, sometimes going back to that cover letter and just going a little more in detail makes one candidate stand out over another. So as painful as they are really important, and it shows that you can follow directions to job applications.
I think it's obvious, it's an obvious point, but something that should be made is make sure that those cover letters are to a certain degree unique to the job that you're applying for. So make sure it's not just, basically a template that you use for every single position that you're going for. Sometimes it's good to be a little bit
And that would be
unique.
for resumes too. You shouldn't have the same resume for every job. You shouldn't have the same cover letter. You can have a template, like a Word document that you edit for each job, but definitely make sure that changes, especially for myself. I see multiple job postings So if you have a cover letter saved as a junior engineer, but you've also applied for a project manager role and you use the
Right.
same cover letter, we will be able to see that on the back end.
Yeah, red flag.
Mary, I was just going to offer also that I look at cover letters. If you can't spell, if there are significant typos in a
Yeah.
cover letter, then that concerns me because I think there's no attention to detail, etc. So it raises a red flag for me for sure. But I enjoy seeing cover letters because it's your opportunity to add a bit of a personal connection to either the role, the organization, or the hiring manager themselves.
Is it important to, just another point, and maybe Michelle, I'll connect with you, is it important to make sure when you're sending cover letters that, because it's a bit of research, but directed to a person versus, I always, because I've received certainly a few applications for positions at the university, and it always annoyed me when they didn't know who they were sending it to, and it was like, dear sir or madam or sir, whatever. You can easily find out who the hiring person is or who you need to be directing it to. Is that important, Michelle, do you think?
Yes, I would be of the column that says that's very important. So especially when the company is a smaller to medium sized business and it is fairly easy to find out who that person is, or one way to find out who that person would be is to pick up the phone and ask. Then I would always say to do that extra little bit of legwork, and you can do that while you're walking around these days on the phone. So yeah, I would definitely say that. And I was going to say something about research too. One of you mentioned a little bit of research about the company. And I know for my last cover letter, and I mean, I don't know how all the decisions were made, but I can absolutely say that I researched the company that I was applying for. I knew that they had won an award as far as top culture. And I mentioned that in my cover letter. So, you know, maybe pointing out if you know that the company is involved in something in the community and that's something that you could see yourself doing, I think it's important to say. As Zoe said, if they go back to the cover letter and that cover letter gives a little bit of advantage, then maybe that's sort of your time to say, I'd really like to take on mentoring children in schools with the PALS program. That's your chance to mention, you know, that they do that.
Really good point.
And
really good point. Michelle, also, is there any, how can you make some slight changes to your resume to reflect a particular job posting? Andrea alluded to that in terms of the formatting. Is there anything else that you would have to add to that? If you are doing several different versions of a resume because you're applying to various jobs, is it just simply maybe your objective, or what is it that would differentiate it from for each posting?
well, like I said, Zoe and Andrea may have more to add, but I guess I would say in many cases, if you're giving a resume and cover letter to someone because you've seen a job posting, that it would be really important to have some of the mirror some of those transferable skills that you're seeing and that you know you have. Make sure they are on there. That's really what I think the recruiter is going to be looking for. So I think sometimes maybe not the exact wording, but very, very close. I think the posting should be able to help you make those changes in less than 5 minutes. So
right. Andrea, what is and I think we talked a little bit about the resume length and layout. You've talked a little bit about layout. Standard 2 pages, is that the standard?
Yeah.
Particularly for students. I mean, obviously, maybe for somebody who's been in the business or been in a position like yourself, who's had years of experience and has much more experience to share, but for students?
I think so, Mary. 1 to 2 pages max. A resume that's 3, 4, 5 pages. I lose interest as a hiring manager. I think it's too long and I don't require that level of detail. And also, you know, I take from that, does this person have difficulty or are they challenged by being brief? Am I going to go crazy if I hire them because they will want to analyze everything? So all of these are cues. You know, we've touched on format in an earlier question. So I just think, you know, keep it as short as possible. I think my sons will always say, Mom, do I have to add my resume names and, numbers and contact info? And I said, you know what, I really don't even see a need to add the line that says references available on request, because that's a standard practice that employers would ask you. So if you're short on space, don't even put that.
Don't even put that, because that's always sort of the, we always put that. So do you
Yeah.
not put, so would you suggest that you don't put references on your resume ever?
I think if you're very early in your career, you don't have a lot, to offer in terms of experience and skills and that sort of thing. It bulks up a resume, but, if you don't need to actually note the names and the contact info, I wouldn't do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
I guess to echo on that too, I would only include them if it's kind of a key player in that company. So if you have a really good connection, but even then it does bulk up a resume. And if you include them on a resume, people might contact them and you haven't even got an interview yet. So usually it kind of controls the narrative where if you get an interview and they ask for references, you can call your references ahead of time saying, I interviewed for this job. This is what they're going to call about. But if you hand them out ahead of time, they might contact them before they even know what job it's for. So really only include them if it gives you a leg up and there's a connection there.
What should not appear on a resume, Zoe? What are some common mistakes that you've seen that you say, oh my gosh, no, don't do it?
People include a photo, their marital status, their religion. And to me, don't include any of that. The only information you need on it is your name, your contact, so your phone number and an email, your education, work experience, and then all your extracurriculars. So just to cut the biases out, somebody might say, when it says you're married, they might think, oh, well, this person might not be committed to work. And it just opens a door of unknowns. And there's really no need. We don't need to see the photo. That can be saved for LinkedIn. So a lot of times I'll see a name. I'll go to LinkedIn to see a little more detail. So definitely don't include a photo. Don't include personal information aside from your contact information.
That's really good tips, because I have seen that a lot of detail that's not necessary in terms of their personal life. Michelle, what are some resources, some good resources that students can? I mean, I know you can probably Google best resumes, et cetera, but do you have some good resources that you can just suggest for some students to give them some guidance?
Yeah, the main one that I was thinking, Mary, was the workroom. So there are many workrooms located in the community. And if students would like to connect with one of the workrooms, I'll just read off the website for you. So it's www.careersthatwork.ca. And you can actually contact a workroom coordinator, and they all have really excellent training to help you create and give you some feedback on your resume. And right now you can do one-on-one appointments with folks virtually. So you don't have to go in person, and someone will go through it with you and make some suggestions, give you some feedback, and hopefully create a document that you really love. Because I think sometimes resumes are just really, they can be a little painful. When you're not in the business that Andrea and Zoe and I are in, it can feel really difficult. And we want to be able to help you pull out some creative words and put some things on resumes that make you different than other people.
And I think it gives, if you have a really good resume, it gives you that sense of confidence, right? When you're putting you've had people look at it, you've had somebody who knows, professionals look at it, you know that there's no common mistakes, it looks really good. It just gives you that sense of confidence. So it's really worth the investment to make sure. And the workrooms are all over the city. So all over St. John's, so no matter where you live, if you're in the city, they're all everywhere. So
yes, they're in St. Stephen.
St. Stephen as well.
Yeah.
And you can do it all virtually too anyway. So they are terrific. So that's a really good resource. Before we move on to, that was the last question I had about resumes. Anything else to add? Anything that we've left out that we need to add before we move into digital, the whole interview part? Andrea, how is it? How is a digital interview different than an in-person interview? I mean, I know logically, obviously, we're in camera, but what are some of the differences between the two?
So I just completed a series of digital interviews within the last 2 weeks. So this one's top of mind for me. I would say that you should treat a digital interview just like a face-to-face interview. You know, the first impression that you create is important, whether it's in person or online. Ensure that you're all set with your technology. So know or try to learn in advance what format, are we using Zoom, Teams, etc., Skype for Business. Understand the format, make sure that, your computer is compatible and you've downloaded whatever you need to download. Be conscious of what the interviewer will see in the background. What they will hear in the background. So I have a little doggy who is a little over a year old, and this little doggy interrupted an interview that I was conducting. So that was equally as, not professional, but anyhow, it happens. So control your environment, be conscious of, what people will see and hear, dress appropriately. We've all seen those online jokes about the people who, they dress from sort of their waist up, and then maybe they've got pajama pants on the bottom. You don't know if you're going to need to stand up. So fully dress for the occasion. Have a plan if the technology fails. And, the other thing that I would offer is understand your reliance on any notes. So if you need notes to prompt you, I don't want to see the top of your head because you're always looking down at your notes. So either make sure they're posted, beside your screen, or don't use them. Just be very, very well prepared. So just make sure that, you've tuck those away appropriately so that, we're seeing your face and, seeing your responses versus the top of your head. Anything else, Zoe or Michelle?
Yeah, any other top tips, Zoe? Anything that you probably have done a few digital interviews over the last 2 years?
Last 2 years, I think they've all been. Same thing. If you do need any prompts, because in an in-person interview, you'd have your resume. If you kind of freeze up, you get to look down.
Right.
The benefit of a virtual interview, I have my whole screen I can use. So if you need to have sticky notes, put them up around your screen. Then you're not looking down. Always have your camera on. Nothing's worse when you get onto an interview and you have to say, "Oh, can you turn your camera on?"
Mm-hmm.
Since we do want to put a face to a name, we want to make sure that we're talking to somebody. But practice. It's the exact same thing as an in-person interview. You should practice your answers, say them out loud, write things down. This was like your one time, probably about 30 minutes to impress the employer. And if you make a good impression, it might lead to that position or open up some other doors. So preparation, camera on. And if you do need those notes, use your screen, but definitely make sure you keep contact with the camera.
Good tips. What are some don'ts, Michelle?
Yes, I know we're overlapping a little bit in our questions because Andrea told you the do's and I'll tell you the don'ts, which kind of echo her do's, I think. And I'm looking down at my notes, so I'm just letting you know.
Don't do that. Don't do that.
Not on my screen. I think certainly I'm very new to the MS Teams world because all during COVID, we really had been in the office the entire time. And just this last lockdown, we went to home work. So I would say one thing I've really learned about just meeting with companies and businesses and people is that please don't have a bright window behind you. Mm-hmm. So when you have a bright window behind you or your light is behind you, all I see is a black shadow. And I think that would be really awful for an interviewer to you know, be trying to tell someone to move away from the window, or if they
Move away from the light.
set up that way, that move away from the light, right?
Right.
So I guess I would say always have the light behind your computer. So it should be, the light should be shining on your face. That's a big one. And yes, I would echo Andrea's, do not read your notes, but I think it's okay to have your notes there. And, you know, if you are someone who gets really nervous in an interview and you know you've done the prep work, you know you've put in the time and the preparation, then it's okay to ask them, you know, just like you would in a regular interview. Is it okay if I just refer to my notes for a moment, or my resume, pick it up, get back on track, take a deep breath and run with it. I would say do not pass up an opportunity to try the technology first. And I've learned that firsthand. Try it with a friend, or try it with your partner, or whoever will try with you, a workroom coordinator. See if you can even try, ahead of time.
That's a really good point. Yeah.
And please don't leave your cell phone on.
You get a chance to see what you look like, because it's really, you can go on to Zoom and have a meeting with yourself, or go into Teams, and you can actually look to see what your background looks like, how far your head is from the, so really is, that's a really good tip, is just to go on and just see what you look like.
Yes, and different companies, I'm sure, use different software. So while I'm very used to MS Teams and Zoom, I know last week we had an event where the company was using a totally different software, and I'd never been on that one before. And I thought, oh, where's the mute button? Where's the video button? Like,
right.
Anytime you can do that ahead. And don't forget your questions, and don't forget to ask questions. So I guess I would always say, write down your questions that you would ask in an in-person interview, also in a virtual interview. So do not forget to use that time to have a conversation with them to find out, is this the right place for me? I guess that's what you're thinking. You're not asking that, but you really want to make sure that this is the right company for you. And because they're trying to figure out the same thing. Is this person a good fit for our company? So ask your questions, have 4 or 5 really good ones prepared, and use your time wisely.
I think that's always something that students and new grads sometimes forget, is that you are exploring the company as much as the company is exploring you. So you need to know that it's a good fit for you, as well as a good fit for the company. So don't feel that it's all one-sided. Make sure that you do ask those questions and figure out whether or not that's the right place for you. Andrew, what about questions to ask? I mean, similar questions, should students or employees look to sort of the same questions that would be asked in a face-to-face interview are being asked in a virtual interview. So you prepare accordingly.
Right. So some of those that, and again, I'm referring to my experience that I just had a few weeks ago, we would ask things like, tell us about yourself, tell me why you should be the best candidate for the role, or you would be the best candidate for the role. What do you know about our company? Why do you want to work for us? Why do you want this role? We tend to ask also behavior-based questions. So tell me about a time when you had to whatever. So have those examples ready of, and again, indicative of whatever role you're interviewing for. Think about what might be some of those scenarios that that person in the role might encounter. One that we throw in, and it's, you just don't know what people are going to say when you ask them this. But at the end, I will always say, is there anything that we haven't asked you that you would like to tell us? And the responses, sometimes they're very funny. Sometimes they're telling about the individual. Sometimes, and we ask that question because, you know, we want to know, perhaps they have an upcoming trip and they're going to be away for 6 weeks, or so it's information like that. But when you offer that question, it tends to throw people off, and they think you're trying to delve deep into, I don't know, their inner whatever. But it's really, we're just wondering, can you get here in time? You know, can you, start when we need you, that sort of thing. So anyhow, it's just a funny one to add, but it makes people think on the spot. So yeah.
It's a good one. I would say it'd be kind of, yeah, you don't know what you're supposed to say, obviously, at that point. I mean, again, I think it's good. I'm ready and willing to work tomorrow or whatever, but yeah.
Yeah.
But that's an
And Mary,
interesting one, yeah.
sometimes, people may say, oh, I forgot. I have a
Mhm.
certification in,
Right.
whatever it is. So it is an opportunity for them to, if they haven't woven, any particular skills or certifications into responses that we've already talked about, then it's their opportunity to add it. Yeah.
A question that just popped up that's a good one too that I'll ask you, Andrea, too. Or what are some good questions that the interviewee can ask you? So we're always thinking, I think it's always important to look like you're interested and to say and to be prepared to ask questions of the employer. So what are some questions that the students could be asking the employers?
Yeah, so
Typical questions.
a few of the questions that I had over the past couple of weeks were, could you tell me about a typical day?
Right.
What do you think success looks like in this role? What does the successful candidate possess, in your opinion? What will make me a success? Yeah, I don't want to hear questions about compensation. I really
No.
don't, as a
No.
hiring manager. That throws me off a bit. And I can find that sometimes I question motivation for the role. But
Right.
when I hear things like, what does success look like? I'm like, yes, okay, good. I'm going to tell you. So I love that question. Yeah.
I like that. Anybody else have any other suggested questions?
I love when they ask, why is this position open? So
Yes,
it's
okay.
a good question for the candidate
Is it a
to
new
ask.
position? Is it a new position, or is
Did
it,
someone leave the company? Did
yes,
they get promoted? It kind of tells
that's
a
a good
lot,
one.
because as a candidate, you want to know if it's a right fit, and if this has been a high turnover role, is that something that you really want to step into?
Yeah.
Is the hiring manager difficult, or the opposite? Somebody has got a promotion and it opened the door up. They're still within the company. There's a lot of growth and development. So it's just a good question for yourself. And as an employer, it's like, okay, they've actually took some time to research our company.
Yeah, that's a really good one. Michelle, do you have any other ones that you?
Yes, I think in my last interview, I asked them at the end, what are the top priorities of the candidate that you do hire in the next 3 months, in the next 6 months, and then in the next year. So I was really looking to gather from that interview, what are their expectations of me or the right candidate? And, and again, gather more information to think about, okay, is that something that I feel I can do? And
yeah, that's a good one. Is it a common question now because of the working remotely? Is that a common question that interviewees can expect to ask or come up if they prefer to work remotely, or is that something that's almost like compensation that you don't touch until the employer brings that up? Anybody have thought on that?
It's definitely one, Mary, that I had within the last couple of weeks for sure. So, interestingly enough, all of the candidates worked remotely. So there was no one on site. So of course, they've developed some practices in terms of the way in which they work, and they were interested in maintaining that. So it is top of mind for job seekers today.
I think so. It's going to be going forward too, I would think. We'll probably cover, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, Mary, can I just say one more quick point?
Yes.
We definitely are hearing lots of, and I think it's more than just millennials, but I think it's a great idea to go into an interview and be prepared to ask about the onboarding process. So what would, once hired, because I think retention is a real issue, and in the next 5 years in New Brunswick, we are going to have a lot of job openings, and companies are going to want to retain you. So it's a good time to ask, what does that process look like? And not what are you doing for me, but you're gathering information about how are you going to train me? What does that look like? And as Andrea said, sort of day to day, but who would I be reporting to? Who would be helping me learn the new role? And I think they really, candidates really do have those questions and want to know before being offered the job.
Yeah, I agree. particularly this generation too. Zoe, here's a question. You mentioned, we talked about, or you three talked a little bit about researching companies a number of times, which is crucially important, I think. What are some good methods, resources that students can use to research companies that they're applying for? Any thoughts?
I use LinkedIn because you can connect with the employees that work there. You can look
Right.
up the companies and get reviews. And if you know anybody, ask them about the culture there, ask them what the work environment's like. And if you know them well enough, you can ask about compensation. If not, there's tons of different sources online, whether it's Glassdoor or different resources that will rank companies and give honest feedback. And I always say use LinkedIn and have those connections. So if you're interested in a role, I'm open to conversations before you even apply. It's kind of great to see if it's a fit for you. I always say you spend more time with your work family than your actual family, 40 hours a week. So you want to make sure it's the right fit for you and you enjoy who you work for and what you do every day.
Excellent. I think too, it's again, obviously I work in alumni relations. So if for a student or somebody who's graduating and you see somebody working in a company who's also a UNB graduate, there's an opportunity that you have a connection with that person. And so reaching out to Andrea or Michelle or Zoe on LinkedIn to say, can you tell me a little bit more about this position? I'm recently graduating, whatever. So that's an opportunity too, if you're on LinkedIn and you see people who are working in companies that you're interested in working in and they're also UNB alumni. That opens a door. And so people are obviously really happy to share their thoughts on a particular company or whatever.
And the same goes for these events, because I know I've attended the graduate awards, different alumni panels. I always look at who attends. So if they ever apply to my jobs, to me, that's something extra they did. Or if they want to reach out, just picking my brain for advice, kind of the door's open. And that's the great thing about all these UNB events. So it's great to attend.
Awesome. Yes, attend. The people that are on here, see, we'll know who's here. Follow-ups. What about following up after an interview? Is it appropriate to follow up? How do you follow up? Do you follow up all the time? If you're not interested in the job at all after the interview, you don't want to follow up. So what are sort of the rules around that, Andrea?
Mary, again, just thinking about my past example, recent past, where I only had one candidate send a thank you note saying, and again, sometimes they don't because they don't have email addresses or, but certainly you've got the email address of someone who connected with you to set up the interview in the first place. So at the very least, you should connect with that person to say, could you please pass this note along to the panel members? So when I don't receive a thank you, an acknowledgement, I question, is this person really interested? Were they just going through the motions? How much, do they want this particular role? So I think it is appropriate to follow up. Zoe's mentioned LinkedIn. It's appropriate, I think, to, follow up even via LinkedIn if you are connected with the interviewer on LinkedIn, and or if you have, their company address, their email address. I can't stress that enough. I personally love it. But again, I might be that generation that, we're still writing thank you notes.
Yeah, true.
And, using a pen, a nice stationery. So Zoe and Michelle, interested in your thoughts.
I love a follow-up. I interview for some seagoing positions. So these candidates, they're not great at interviews, and that's not something we want to judge them on. But when someone follows up with an email just saying, thank you so much for taking the time to interview with me, I really look forward to working for your company. It just shows they went a bit above and beyond, especially if I'm doing 45 interviews in a day and I hear back from 3 of them. Those 3 did a little extra and they were thoughtful, and they might not have that interview, but this could have kind of redeemed themselves, and it's just a nice little added touch.
Agreed. Michelle, you agree, I'm assuming?
I agree. I concur.
It is. I mean, there's nothing better than a thank you, and we all want to be thanked, and we all want to be appreciated. And I think we want, it's a competitive world out there, and so if you can stand out a little bit by showing that little bit of extra, I think why not? It's certainly not going to hurt. I think that's the most important. It's not going to hurt you. It may very well help you. So I think it's important for students to know that. One question that we had submitted, it's about the answering questions. Do answers, when you're asked a question, an interview is asked a question, do they always have to be short? It's always the thing, do we talk too much? Or should we be exaggerating with certain answers if we wish to? Should we be honest about our opinions? Are you telling them what you want to hear? I mean, what is sort of the rules around that? Is it short and concise answers? Or depending on the question, I guess it depends. Anybody have a thought on that?
I think for me, if they're short, concise answers, and again, Zoe, it goes back to kind of role dependent. So if you are interviewing for a role where brevity, concise, quick responses are the norm and required, then certainly you're probably in a forum where the interview panel members might be looking for that as well. So gauge in terms of who's interviewing you, the type of role. Again, you might even want to upfront at the beginning of the interview ask, how much time do we have? Can you tell me a little bit about how much time I have to respond to questions? So just get a feel for that. Should job seekers always be honest about their opinions? Well, so I would say that in my job searches, I maybe haven't always been honest about my opinions because perhaps, I have a differing opinion about something than my employer or what have you. So, again, kind of gauge that and judge in terms of how much you want the job and how, maybe those differing opinions might clash if you accept the job. Give answers that please the interviewer. Well, of course, I mean, that is the name of the game. You're going to want to leave a favorable impression, but we also want to know the real you. So we want to hear what you believe. We want to see your personality. So again, gauge that. And I think, the interview panel members will appreciate you bringing yourself, your true self, to the interview. And then that enables us to make decisions.
That old tell me about yourself question. I have to say, I've seen people talk for 10 seconds and I've seen people talk for 7 minutes. So I would say there's an in-between, a good in-between, and to talk about yourself for about a minute. I don't know if Zoe and Andrea would agree with that, but a minute and no longer than 2 minutes. So make sure you take some time to practice, and especially with the behavioral questions, you really need to use the STAR method. And I know that's on UNB's website somewhere. I think under the Career and Guidance Services website. For the behavioral, you can be too short. You can fall short. You need to be able to describe the situation, the task, the action that you took, and the result. And it has to be a positive result. So what is a project you worked on? Be able to talk about the project. What was your part in it? What actions did you take in the project? And what was the result? So especially for university students, be confident in those projects you have been working on for the last 4 years. See those as experiences that will be valuable in the workplace, and really take your time and practice out at least 4 good behavioral situations is what I would say.
Yeah, that's a really good tip. I have a question. It's a situational question from one of the students online. They're applying for a 16-month internship starting in the summer, but they've already been offered a job for the summer for 4 months. So now they're in a dilemma. Is it possible to discuss with the interviewing company of extending the start date or reducing the job to a 12 months after the summer? So it's a 16-month internship. He's already committed to a 4-month summer job, doesn't want to refuse that summer job, it seems. Should you go back to the company who has a 16-month internship and say, I have a job, can we extend it? Is it a matter of just having a conversation and being honest with the potential employer? Thoughts?
So I would say honesty is best. It may be a case of, 16 months is perhaps, the time has been chosen because there's funding for 16 months,
Right,
or
right.
so it could be something related to that. So, with a conversation though, you can ascertain if it is possible to perhaps do both, and maybe the work
Mm.
could be done within 12 months. And so there could be some arrangement that could be made.
And definitely have it sooner, the conversation sooner rather than later. You don't want to start a week before this position and then you have to kind of, you're throwing one of them for a loop. When people are honest up front, like Andrea said, that question when they, is there anything else you want to tell us? Same thing. If you have a trip book, that's 4 weeks. We've had candidates that they had a trip book that was a month long. So they started work, they did their month vacation and they came back. So honesty goes a long way.
I agree. Have to be honest to this person who's put on and I think people are very open to that. Is you sharing that, you know what, you're great that you have this 4-month position that you've already, and it shows that you don't want to disappoint the summer employment either. So you don't want to say no to them. So it shows some character that, you don't want to disappoint the 4-month position. You're also interested in the internship. So I would certainly try to be as honest as you can. Just before we close, we've got another question about a LinkedIn. We talked a little bit about LinkedIn. This individual has a LinkedIn profile and has a link to their resume on their LinkedIn profile. So how much detail do you need on the LinkedIn profile if you have a lot of those details on your resume? Do you need to repeat, or is it just sufficient to have your resume connected and then you can add some other details on your LinkedIn profile? And how important is LinkedIn to a potential employer? I think it's very important, but that's my 2 cents, but you guys can answer that.
It's definitely important having a photo, being updated.
Yeah.
And I say, especially now, if you're looking for work, whether it's for summer or full time, start looking now. Sometimes the interview process can take 1 to 2 months. I think I started applying around this time when I was a student, and I got my full time position in April. It was from LinkedIn, it was connecting with people, it was commenting, liking, sharing, attending events. It's make it kind of part of your routine. Like if you're going on Instagram once a day or every so often, just scroll through LinkedIn, start connecting, and you never know what opportunity that will bring.
Exactly.
So I was going to say, treat looking for a job like your job. So be very diligent, to your point about, how are you interacting on social media platforms for sure, and especially LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we will. I mean, the whole online presence is something that we'll be discussing next month. And LinkedIn is a big part of that. And obviously other parts of social media, whether it's Facebook, et cetera, and making sure that you have the appropriate profile when you're looking for work. One other question, and we may have touched a little bit about how to answer questions in a way that's both professional and authentic during online interviews. This individual finds, I find I struggle as they often lack many of the social cues and interactions that occur during an in-person interview. Sometimes you can't see necessarily those cues when you're online. So you don't know, are you saying too much, or et cetera, et cetera. Any advice to give?
That's a tough one.
No, it is too.
So I'll say that the role I have now was a phone interview. And even, 5 years ago, we weren't using video technology as we are now. So it's a tough one. So you're right. I was sitting there in the dark. I didn't know if people were smiling at what I said, if they were grimacing at what I said. So it is tough. I don't have any tips, or I think being attentive to the silence and asking if do they require more information? Should you elaborate on something? That's the only thing I might offer.
That's good. One final question before we cut it off. and I know what the answer is going to be, but is it bad to follow people on LinkedIn even if you've never met them?
No, it's not like Facebook.
No.
Facebook, you only have your friends on there. LinkedIn, you can send lots of connections, especially if it's a company you're interested in. And if you send connections to your family, friends, and people in your community, you're going to realize they actually have some pretty important jobs and they can help you in the long run. And it's just great to see what opportunities are happening, and sending connections not a bad thing. The more the merrier.
No, and particularly as I go back to UNB, if they're UNB alumni, connect with them, particularly if they're working in a field that's really of interest to you, and send them an in message and introduce yourself. So no, it's never a bad thing. Feel free to connect with me, to connect with any of the panelists, I'm sure. So it's never a bad thing to connect with people that you don't know. It opens the doors to many possibilities. So feel free. Well, we're coming up on 1 o'clock, and this has been terrific. I think we got through a lot of questions. It's been an incredible hour spent with these 3 individuals. I hope the students who are tuning in got a lot of good information. I'm sure you did. And again, the recording will be posted, so you can go back and take another listen if you've missed something. Thank you to Andrea and to Zoe and to Michelle. Thanks so much for spending your hour with us and to sharing your advice and expertise with these students. It's incredibly important to us to have this access and to be able to provide, some connections to our students with our alumni. So thank you so much for this. And to thank you, students. Again, March 22nd, we have another session, again, talking about online presence. So if you're looking to have more information about LinkedIn, how LinkedIn is used, etc., please feel free to join us on March 22nd. You can register, and you may have already registered if you're already online. So thank you so much. Have a great week, rest of your week. It's a nice short week this week. And for you students, all the best, stay safe. And to our alumni, thanks so much again, and take care. And hopefully we'll get to see everybody in person sometime soon.
Thank you, Mary, for having us.
Thank you so much.
Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
See you.
Bye.